Hello and welcome to News Desk. I'm Melissa Chan.
And I'm Alex Forrest-Whiting.
We are taking a closer look at the future of Taiwan this week. What does it mean for a small democracy when it faces such a formidable threat as the People's Republic of China? What is life actually like in Taiwan? And what misconceptions do many people have? We'll have two guests who will be joining us today, journalist and author Chris Horton from Taipei and from DC, analyst at the Hudson Institute, Jason Su.
Yes, and we will also have a new person joining us in the chat today. That's Annalie Hepulani-Naitela. Thank you so much for being here. You will be making sure that everybody is behaving nicely in the chat. Any comments, any questions they put in, you will make sure that they're fed back. And it is your first time that you've done this.
Welcome to News Desk.
But not your first time, obviously, at DW, because you're always working, for example, for DW YouTube, but behind the scenes. This is the first time we get to see you in this studio.
Exactly, yeah. It's my first time on a live stream and I am a little excited.
Good. And you've got a poll for us before we start.
Yes. So this week we're interested in what you think the future of Taiwan will look like. You can take a look in the live chat at the poll, and there are four options. What you might think the future of Taiwan will look like. Will there be continued self-governance or closer ties with China? Will Taiwan face increased tension with China? Or do you think it's too unpredictable to say? So, yeah, let us know in the chat.
Yeah, that's great. And we will feed back what that poll result is towards the end of the stream. So looking forward to what those results are. And we would love to hear from you. Do please put your comments, your questions in the chat, and we will try to put them to our guests, or as many as we can, that is. And we've also had quite a lot of discussion going on underneath our community post.
Already.
Some of it very pro-China. For example, Abu Rasel's Hontu says, Taiwan already is part of China. The whole world recognises this. Max DC says, hypocritical Germans want their West and East united, but they don't want to see China mainland unite with Taiwan. This is the typical hypocritical mentality of some Westerners, that person says. But BDE says, we all stand with Taiwan. Their government is the real Chinese government before the communist mafia swept in and corrupted everything. So as you can see, this is a very hot topic, very different views there. Looking forward to hearing what you want to say and what questions you will have. And we will definitely try and put those to our guests a little bit later.
Yeah, and if you're just joining us, if you joined us a few minutes late, just to let you know that we're talking about Taiwan this week. We're going to catch you up on the latest in terms of news and development. And then we're actually going to do sort of take a step back and do what I call Taiwan 101, or maybe a Taipei 101. That's a joke if you know anything about Taipei. And sort of look at all the things that you've always wanted to ask about Taiwan. Things that might seem pretty obvious to people who live there, but you might have wondered, because it's not an easy news topic at all. So that's our plan, and be sure to, of course, be sure to post those questions, because we have two amazing guests. I'm going to bring them in right now, joining us from Taipei. Welcome to Chris Horton, author of the new book, Ghost Nation, The Story of Taiwan and Its Struggle for Survival. And we also have Jason Su, senior fellow at Hudson Institute, joining us from DC. And he is also a former legislator in Taiwan's parliament. So if you have any questions about that aspect, definitely send your question in. So thanks for joining us, both of you guys.
Great to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, so first thing, I want to pull up Chris's book now to show everyone. Full disclosure, I read Chris's book, liked it, and officially endorsed it. In my opinion, the book is a solid contribution to Taiwan studies. It is exactly the kind of book a journalist moving to Taiwan should read. And I know, Chris, that you've been visiting universities as well, so I suspect that we'll be seeing this on the curriculum of some courses. I'm going to start with you, Chris, and ask a question related to your book. You have in your title the word ghost. So why use the word ghost to describe Taiwan?
Well, I guess there's two different reasons for that. The first reason is traditionally there's been different nicknames for Taiwan connected to the concept of ghosts, and so the Japanese, when they first arrived, they called it something akin to Ghost Island because there were these invisible diseases that would fell their soldiers, and also it was just generally a hazardous place to visit. It wasn't the friendly, welcoming place that it is today. And then also later on, when the Chinese Nationalist Party, also known as the Kuomintang, arrived, they used the term ghost island, Guidao, to kind of denigrate Taiwan and kind of make Taiwanese people feel it's very small compared to China. And more recently, young Taiwanese people have kind of embraced it as it's our ghost island, and there's a bit of a kind of taking it back kind of thing. But also, if you look at Taiwan's place in the international space, diplomatically and whatnot, it's been ghosted by the world. It is a country, whether you call it Taiwan or the Republic of China or the Republic of China, Taiwan, it is a sovereign country. That is the status quo. Taiwan it meets all the requirements of the Montevideo Convention. You have a fixed population, a government, the ability to enter into diplomatic, the ability to interact with other states, and and fixed borders. So,
And sorry, the Montevideo Convention is the convention that help try to define what a country is. I believe that's
exactly.
Okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and it's more or less the international standard. And so and then it not only is it a major economy, it's like a near G20 economy, maybe 21st or 22nd largest on the planet. It's also the biggest supplier of chips. It's Taiwan's technological output is everywhere in the world, in democracies and all other states as well. And so you have this kind of like a ghost. It's there everywhere, but you can't really see it. Yeah, so I guess and because it is a country, I didn't want to call the book Ghost Island, so I chose the name Ghost Nation instead.
It's an easy mistake to make, one that I have myself, by the way, as you know. Jason, last week, Taiwan was also a ghost in a much anticipated meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping. According to Trump, he claims that Taiwan did not come up at all in their multi-hour talk. So my question to you is, do you have a sense why? And do you think that was a good thing for Taiwan or a bad thing?
Well, first of all, I think it's both a blessing and hidden worry. Blessing in a way that it is not used as a chip on the chessboard to be traded for the grand bargaining, at least for this time around. It's a hidden worry because Taiwan is now going from a piece on the chessboard to become a tripwire. Both sides are refrained from using this card until the last moment. So it shows that stake is higher and higher. So it's remained to be seen if and when President Trump visits Xi Jinping in Beijing in March, what would he be coerced or compelled to say in that setting, especially in a situation like that in Xi Jinping's home court. So as a Taiwanese, and we are quite concerned because what is not being said in public doesn't mean that it's not said in private. And I sense that Xi had told Trump what he would like him to hear and what he would like him to say, but Trump did not react to it. But it doesn't mean that Taiwan didn't get mentioned or Taiwan is off the hook. What I worry that is get pushed back and the stake gets higher and higher.
And it's always hard to interpret where these days the U.S. stands in regards to Taiwan under this administration. Even when Trump won, it was very clear that President Trump had ambivalent feelings at the most about Taiwan. Here's another fresh headline, Jason, I want you to address. The delivery of the F-16 jets. It looks like the United States is going to try to expedite that. Do you think we should be reading a lot into it? Or, you know, I almost lose track of the discussion about the movement of big military weapons and jets to Taiwan. That seems to be something that's always discussed, orders being delayed or needed to be sped up, and so on and so forth.
That's right. I think this type of delivery is both a signal to China that Taiwan is committed to its self-defense and the U.S. is committed to the regional security. But also it shows that this type of delay has been persisted over the years, and it's important that we get the type of capabilities that we need. And this obviously has been long awaited, and it shows that at this time around, the deterrence is more and more important, and also the stake couldn't be higher because Taiwan now faces a more dire situation in terms of our cross-strait crisis and a potential conflict that might unveil in the coming years, and if we were not ready or prepared.
Hello, Jason. It's Alex here, sitting next to Melissa. I just wanted to put some comments to you and to Chris as well, but I think particularly to you on this one from our chat. We have our users who are watching this and putting their comments and their questions in the chat. And Psyche Machin has this comment, just talking particularly about President Trump. I think Trump doesn't want to talk about Taiwan in order to avoid anything that may be provocative and cause another tension. And then we have this from William Patton, who says the only two questions in his opinion are, is Trump going to come to Taiwan's aid when, he says, China invades? And if the US does intervene, how do they actually counter hypersonic missiles? So I wonder if you might be able to briefly answer that.
Well, Jason, the military geeks are online clearly when they talk about hypersonic missiles. Over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we have to understand Trump from a business person nature, and he's looking to do deals, and he's transactional by nature. He's instinctive. He's not strategic. So we have to understand him going forward in dealing with either his administration or President Trump himself. So the way we see this is we can't completely count on US's commitment or for the lack of or whatever that's been said or not said, and or our expectation needs to be self-managed. And that is one way to say that we have to bolster our own self-defense and then increase the whole society resilience. And then lastly, the upcoming special budget review in the LY Legislative Yuan must be passed unanimously. Both ruling party and opposition party must establish a consensus that defense and the foreign policy dispute must stop at the edge of our island, and we need to stand unified when we face China. And with regard to the hypersonic missile, I think right now she does not have the might to move against Taiwan for a number of reasons. We've seen he's purged a bunch of military leaderships within the PLA establishment, and we've also seen the lack of sufficient development of the rocket force. So there's been some setback within his own establishment. So I think we shouldn't be terrified by our own fear that we self-created. And we must understand that only when we are strong from inside out can we defend ourselves with anything that might come to us, both psychologically and as well as militarily.
Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, yeah, I agree with a lot of Jason's points. I think also similarly to what you have going on in Europe with kind of questions about the U.S. commitment there, you're starting to see a lot more coordination here regionally in East Asia. So, for example, in September, a reciprocal access agreement just went into effect between Japan and the Philippines, two countries of 120 million people that flank Taiwan. And if Taiwan were to become part of China, then you would have the People's Liberation Army, China's military, on the doorstep of both of these countries who are U.S. treaty allies. and they're coordinating much more closely, and they're increasing their unofficial interactions with Taiwan as well, and also Australia is kind of in the chat as well. And so there is this kind of sense of we need to kind of get our neighborhood a little bit more cohesive than it's been in the past, because in the past, all the countries kind of surrounding China that are allies of the U.S., they've kind of had treaty relationships with the U.S. but not with each other, and so there's actually a defense pact that the Philippines and Japan are working on right now that may be announced next year. So I think there's a lot of things going on kind of behind closed doors right now, and it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
And I guess this is all part of the greater trend of the multilateral world that we're all entering, where the United States is not necessarily taking the lead on a lot of matters. Jason or Chris, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I would agree.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Jason, go for it.
Yeah, I think from sitting in Washington, D.C., I sense this shift in U.S.-China dynamics all the time, especially from what Trump himself wants, and as well as what the hawks within Trump's administration, as well as on the Capitol Hill want. And so we've seen this sort of disjoint kind of messaging, and as well as delivery of the policy projected outwards. So this actually gave Beijing a vacuum to divide Taiwanese society easily. And PLA or CCP is eroding democracy from outside. And so we need to be aware that Americans' messaging to its allies needs to be unified. Otherwise, I think it gives China, an incredible opportunity, especially within this administration, with Trump himself looking to do deals. And again, I don't see the Trump-Xi meeting in Korea is any sort of solution coming out. It's more of a temporary truce. What could be a total showdown could be if Trump does visit Xi in Beijing, he would be baited into a scenario where he cannot say no, whatever is being asked. And that's what really worries me. And we need to be prepared for any rhetoric and political language and concessions that might alter the status quo.
Chris, does that worry you? And sorry about throwing the question to both of you guys, but it turns out neither of you are shy. So that, and also whatever you wanted to say about the multilateralism.
Yeah, well, that does seem to be the trend right now, and for better or for worse. And I think now that we're in Trump 2, there's a lot of recalibrating going on that wasn't necessarily going on during Trump 1. And I think you look at the new Japanese prime minister. She met with Trump, and that was a big meeting for Japan and the U.S. But also she met at APEC twice with Taiwan's representative to APEC. It's one of the few international organizations in which Taiwan is a member. So I think there was some signaling there that the Japan-U.S. relationship is still on good footing, but also that the new administration in Japan is going to prioritize Taiwan to a degree that maybe her predecessor did not.
Great. Now I want to move into our second section where we sort of try to dispel myths or misunderstandings about Taiwan, the kind of thing that you don't get a chance to dig into in a regular news bulletin. So I want to start with Jason and ask about what your focus is at the Hudson Institute these days. And you are, of course, also a legislator in Taiwan. And it might even surprise people that Taiwan has its own parliament, right? So if you can talk a little bit about that as well, it would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a senior fellow at Hudson Institute, I work on semiconductor and geostrategy as well as Indo-Pacific partnerships. And basically looking at how Taiwan being positioned in a nexus of US and China competition, and with itself being the powerhouse of semiconductor global supply chain, how do we navigate? It is rather complicated US-China relationship. and with TSMC now investing in hundreds of billions in the United States, how would that change or affect so-called silicon shield? Or is there ever a shield to start with? And so this is all very nuanced and complicated issues to think through. And as I have mentioned, Trump has completely rebalanced the global power by leveraging tariff as both a weapon and a tool. And so how does Taiwan and its allies, such as Japan, and can work together to reestablish a type of economic security alliance to address this issue? It's also something that I worked on. As for your question on Taiwan being this, and I think Chris would have also a good comment on this as well, being a ghost island, but also an invisible nation, is probably the best way it can be right now, as in a way that it gives China a pain in the neck all the time, but also it shows the world that what a democratic Chinese-speaking country could be. And also, we have our own parliament, as you have mentioned. We have our own government, military, and our financial system. It shows to the world that Taiwan is indispensable, and both in the economic value and as well as the global technology supply chain. And that's why the talk of a potential Taiwan contingency in 2027 is so heated right now. But I think what we want for the moment, especially going forward in the next few years, is to maintain the status quo and to ensure that the island remain resilient, and as well as that we can keep ourselves on the edge, and as well as have the right messaging to our allies when and if a contingency happens. How do we coordinate amongst our allies to work together? And as I was in Europe a few weeks ago, and I told our European friends that a Indo-Pacific contingency will have rippling effect to European continent. And it's very likely to become a two-theater scenario. And so that's why everything that happens in Taiwan must be paid attention to by the European friends here.
Thank you, Jason. And I know that you have to go in just a few minutes, but I'm going to ask Chris a question. And then after Chris speaks, Jason, we'll go back to you for one last comment and then let you get going. Chris, Jason just introduced and talked a little bit about his work. Can you just tell us about your book a bit more?
Yeah, my book is, well, the world doesn't really know much about Taiwan, and there's reasons for that. But it's basically to explain those reasons, and also to highlight Taiwan's transformation over the past 401 years since the Dutch arrived, the same year that they arrived in Manhattan as well, but just by coincidence. But it's been colonized. Taiwan has been subject to serial colonization for 400 years. And now you basically have Taiwanese people running their own show for the first time ever. And with that, and it's through their democracy. And, that hasn't given them a seat at the table of nations per se, but technology has. And so, both the history of Taiwan, the democratic transformation, and also the rise of Taiwan's technological sector are all parts of the book. But just adding on to what Jason said, I think I totally agree with his points. But I would like to add that in terms of like TSMC being like something that would deter China from attacking, if TSMC were to be destroyed, one of the biggest providers of the chips just below that technological level that TSMC is operating at, the most advanced level, is China. So there is a way to kind of view that as an incentive, perhaps, to destroy TSMC. But I mean, that would incur massive economic losses to the world, including China. So it's really hard to say how much stomach Xi Jinping might have for something like that.
We'll get back to that probably later. I suspect that's something that a lot of people in chat are interested in. But Jason, last thing, and I'm going to be talking a little bit more with Chris about this once you exit, because Chris spends quite a bit in his book talking about what the way that media and others talk about Taiwan and the debate whether Taiwan is a country or not. Jason, I'm sure you hear this all the time. Taiwan is not a country. So with just a few minutes left for you, what is your argument whenever you hear somebody say that, especially in the United States? There's actually a lot of people who say that, and you have a few minutes. How do you change their minds?
Well, I would say that Taiwan is a de facto country. We function as a country. We operate like a country, a legitimate government around the world, and we are we have a seat in APEC, although not recognized as a official title of Taiwan, but we are an important member to the global community. What I would say is we are in a state where we are is because of China's aggression and China's oppressions on democracy, on what could a potential Chinese democratic model could be. So it's a very reason we exist in the world, and it's important to note that because of this model and this success that Taiwan was able to establish through robust democracy, and frankly, we've gone through the struggle ourselves, and it is all the more important for the world to pay attention to this small island and the type of challenge and aggression that we are dealing with. And what I worry for China is not a sudden invasion, but a sort of a slimy slicing type of aggression, and as well as a gray zone activities that would inch closer and closer to Taiwan. What China is trying to do is to create a fait accompli, and basically by establishing the fact that any sort of a conflict happening within the Taiwan Strait is an internal affair, and is trying to create a narrative to the global community that this is none of your business. This is our internal affair. This is China's affair, and we need to make the world know that the world without a Taiwan is more than just a loss of a country, but it's more of an important member to a global community as well as the technology provider. So just want to shout out there. Thank you, Melissa and Alex, and also all of those listening, and continue to support Taiwan. And thank you, Chris, for your wonderful work and years of reporting. And I'm spreading good words for you here in Washington, D.C. as well.
Jason Su, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And there have been quite a lot of comments as well since we've been talking. I didn't want to interrupt because I know that Jason was on a time limit and had to go.
He was on a roll.
And he was on a roll, had a lot to say. So just thank you to everyone who's putting comments in and putting questions in. Murphy Home, just picking up on what Jason was saying, and obviously Chris with the title of your book. Murphy Home says, the status quo equals no international recognition, and earlier the same person says no recognition equals no sovereignty. So this is obviously the problem for Taiwan at the moment. While on the one hand we're talking there about that Taiwan is doesn't particularly want people to see it, but at the same time, as Jason was saying, it's fighting to be recognised for what it believes it is, which is a country. So that's being picked up there. And also, DeVos, thank you very much for joining us, DeVos, has been putting various questions into the chat as well, including one perhaps for you, Chris, asking, while we're talking about the Chinese, what China how it views Taiwan and how Taiwan sees it as a threat. What is trade like between the two? Because is that something that China can use against Taiwan? I know Taiwan has got good relations with other countries. We've been talking about, for example, semiconductors and chips. But what is it like between China?
I think that's a great question. Chris?
It is a good question. Yeah, and usually the answer to that question is framed in terms of what leverage does China have over Taiwan. But I think, if you look at China's economic rise, it was largely fueled by technology transfer, management skills transfer, and investment from Taiwan. And even today, TSMC has fabs in China, and there's a lot of cross-strait trade, and it's not all it's not unidirectional. It's bilateral. So, obviously Taiwan is smaller and its economy is smaller than China's, but it does provide a lot of technology that China needs and can't produce itself.
I think once upon a time, people forget, and possibly there are people listening who might not even have been alive at the time, but once upon a time, Taiwan and Hong Kong were far richer than all of the People's Republic of China, kind of emerging from the disastrous years of the Cultural Revolution into the 80s and that period of political liberalization and economic change. So that's a fantastic point to make. I want to go back to this country thing, Chris. In your book, you devote quite a bit to sort of complaining about how the world describes Taiwan. I'm going to share with you, in the interest of transparency, DW's policy on Taiwan. And I'd love for you to tell us where you think we got it right and where you think we got it wrong. So I'm going to read this. It's also on the screen right now. Quote, "In our reporting on Taiwan, the most accurate and neutral term to use is simply Taiwan, instead of referring to it as a country or a state. Other neutral terms include island or territory. Most countries around the world do not recognize Taiwan as an independent state. Many countries do, however, maintain informal relations with Taiwan's government. From Beijing's perspective, Taiwan has been a renegade province since 1949. In that year, the defeated nationalists of the Kuomintang Party fled to the island from Mao's winning Communist Party." Anyways, it's not the first time you've heard a style guide in the English language with something similar. So what do you think?
Well, I would say calling Taiwan an island or a territory is they're both incorrect. It's more than one island, and if you say it's a territory, who's it a territory of? It's never been part of the People's Republic of China. This is just a historical fact.
What do you mean by that? Could you clarify that?
Well, the People's Republic of China has never administered Taiwan. It was founded in 1949, and the People's Republic was under Mao. And the Communist Party of China only started to claim Taiwan as its territory in 1943, just a few months after the Republic of China, the Kuomintang party state that was overthrown by the Communist Revolution. After they, under Chiang Kai-shek, he claimed that Taiwan was Chinese territory. But basically, in all of human history, you've only got 4 years, from 1945 to 1949, where a China-based Chinese government administered all of Taiwan. And we don't have enough time to go through all the history, but basically, right. It wasn't until Japan came along in 1895. After the Qing dynasty who were Manchu, they were not Chinese. They administered maybe a third. They loosely administered like the coastal plain of Taiwan, but you have like the other 2/3 of it, which is mountainous and full of indigenous Taiwanese people who do exist and are not Chinese in any way. So the original inhabitants here are not Taiwanese, or sorry, not Chinese. But then you have, it was the Japanese that really brought Taiwan into the modern era. When they arrived, and this was colonialism, it was extractive for sure. But they introduced education, rule of law. They industrialized and modernized Taiwan, which was not a country at the time. It was a colony. It was Japan's first colony, and it was a showcase colony for the rest of Asia, because Japan had big plans for the rest of Asia, as we all know. If we look back at what happened in the Second World War. But when Japan arrived in Taiwan in 1895, most Taiwanese people were illiterate peasants, and when they left 50 years later, they were one of the most well-off and educated societies in all of Asia, and they had rule of law and all these like a great healthcare system compared to the rest of Asia, all these things that that Taiwanese people expected to continue to have after the arrival of the Kuomintang on American warships in 1945 following Japan's surrender. Very quickly, things fell apart. The Kuomintang did not show any interest in really administering Taiwan. They wanted to take what they could get from it. They had a nickname for it, Baodao, which is Treasure Island. And lots of people from China heard about this. They came over to Taiwan, and along with them came diseases that hadn't been in Taiwan for 2 or 3 decades, like cholera and bubonic plague. And there was a breakdown of society. The price of rice skyrocketed, and just general like corruption across the board. And so Taiwanese people got very tired of this quickly. And, in that 5-year period that I mentioned earlier, halfway through, Taiwanese people violently rebelled against the Kuomintang, against their new Chinese overlords. And they killed Chinese people. There in the hundreds for sure. And then a week later, Chiang Kai-shek sent over boatloads of soldiers that arrived in the north and south of Taiwan, and they basically they went on a rampage, killing, and it was targeted killings. They went after anybody who was against Chinese rule. They went against they killed judges, civil servants, doctors, lawyers.
Right.
And within a 3-week period in March of 1947, they killed an estimated 28,000 Taiwanese people. And these are the people that would have been the rulers, would have been the leaders of an independent, sovereign, democratic Taiwan. But that's not, what happened. You end up with the Republic of China party state. It's the Kuomintang's party state, the Republic of China. They clamp down on Taiwanese people, and then 2 years later, they lose the Chinese Revolution to the communists, or the Chinese Civil War, pardon me, and they rebase in Taiwan. And what ends up happening after that is you have 38 years of martial law, and so then the Kuomintang was doing kind of they had a dual track thing where they were trying to keep down people in favor of Taiwanese who were seeking an independent Taiwanese state, but they were also very concerned that there were 5 million people in Taiwan before they rebased, and then 2 million people went along with the Kuomintang across the strait to Taiwan. And Chiang Kai-shek was very concerned that there were communist infiltrators in those 2 million people. So a lot of Chinese people suffered greatly in Taiwan. Nobody really won.
Right.
It was a very. Go ahead.
Oh, no, please finish your thought. I mean, I'm just thinking that it's clearly like what you've laid out, which might be the first time a lot of people have gotten a clear summary of 20th century history of Taiwan, is clearly that it is a contested territory. But the claim from the PRC, the People's Republic of China, about the renegade province actually doesn't make sense based on what you're telling us.
Also, Chris, as you've been talking, it sparked quite a lot of comments in the chat. So I do just want to pick up on some of those, because obviously there are people in this chat who do not agree with what you've said, and again saying that Taiwan is part of China. So that aside, the question I wanted to put to you is from Nile Chatuverdi, who's one of our regular viewers, and it's always great to have you, Nile. He always is very good at finding statistics and information for us as we're chatting along. So he was talking about what you were just saying about Taiwan and China, and saying it was part of China until 1894, is what Nile says. Until its defeat in the Sino-Japan War, China lost control over Taiwan, and then it wasn't until the 1940s that Japan controlled Taiwan. So I've just put that out there. Is that correct, Chris?
If you believe that Manchurians that the Manchu people are Chinese, which they have their own culture, their own language, their own writing system. They didn't use chopsticks. Are they Chinese? I don't know. If you think that the Manchu were Chinese, then that might make sense in your world. But to be honest, the Manchu they conquered China, and then they conquered Taiwan, and they didn't even really conquer it. They loosely administrated it through Taiwanese gentry. So if you're and this is where the Chinese Communist Party and Chinese nationalists in general really have an advantage, because these details seem really minor to outsiders and to people in other countries. Like the Qing dynasty, the Ming dynasty, it's all the same. But the Qing and the Yuan, which was a Mongolian dynasty, these are, even in China, they're considered two foreign dynasties. But when it comes to a Taiwan context, suddenly the Qing, the Manchu, they're Chinese. And the Manchus have been assimilated to such a degree that today we call what used to be Manchuria, we just call it the northeast of China. And most of the Manchu, I lived in China for 13 years. Most of the Manchu people that I met didn't speak Manchurian, and they thought of themselves as, I'm basically Chinese. So, that's what China's doing in Inner Mongolia. They're doing it in former East Turkestan, which is now more broadly known as Xinjiang, the Chinese name for it, and in Tibet. And also it's happening in Hong Kong. This assimilation program has been going on in other places for a long time. And you have Chinese diplomats in France and Australia in recent years have both said, once we liberate Taiwan, re-education comes next.
I want to go back to that question of the country. What would you advise newsrooms, Chris, who are telling their journalists and saying as a style guide, and by the way, the DW style guide is not unique. I believe Associated Press and a lot of other standard newsrooms have a similar policy where they avoid the use of country. What would you say to an editor-in-chief who will be updating the style guide, as we do periodically?
I would say don't outsource your editorial policy to the Chinese Communist Party. Look at it for yourself. It's like the saying. It's as a journalist, it's not your job to talk to people who say, if someone says it's raining and someone says it's not, you stick your head out the window and you check to see if it's raining. And so you got to look at the facts. And China does not control Taiwan in any way. Taiwan, it has its own internal political divisions because it was basically invaded in the 40s by the previous Chinese government. So there's that internal thing, and this is in the world today, a lot of people worry about refugees, and they're like, oh, they're going to take over the country and stuff like that. That's never happened anywhere in the world except for in Taiwan, and so it was this refugee government from China, Chiang Kai-shek's Kuomintang, the Chinese Nationalist Party, they were telling the world that we're the real China. This is China, and we're going to retake the mainland or the motherland, as they might refer to it. But it was Chiang Kai-shek that made the reason that China or that Taiwan doesn't have a seat in the United Nations and that it's so diplomatically isolated is because Chiang Kai-shek, who is a valued anti-communist warrior, for a lot of democracies back in the day during the Cold War, he refused to give up the China seat that his government in Taiwan had from 1949 to 1971 until the representatives of Chiang Kai-shek were ejected from the United Nations. But the U.S. and other countries were pushing a two-state solution. I know it rings some bells here,
yes.
But a two-state solution in which the Republic of China in Taiwan would accept a Taiwan seat in the General Assembly, and then the People's Republic of China, which was a fifth of humanity at the time, more or less, they would get the China seat in the Security Council. And it's blaming it all on the People's Republic of China it's kind of glossing over a lot. You have these two Chinese, Han Chinese ethno-nationalist parties that they were mortal enemies during the Civil War and during the Cold War. But then with democratization in Taiwan, and there were people in the Kuomintang that were pro-democratization. You can't paint the Kuomintang all in one color. But Chiang Kai-shek and his successor and son Jiang Jingguo, they were kind of a dynasty unto their self. And then with Chiang Kai-shek's son's passing, that really paved the way to democratization. And then kind of the Taiwanese identity really was once again released from the lamp. And in 2005, the Communist Party and the KMT, they met in China and effectively normalized party-to-party relations. And ever since then, in that 20 years, you've had a growing closeness between these two parties that continues today.
Chris, a couple of comments here. William Patton, when you were going through the history of it all, said that was interesting. William Lay then said, is this a history class? William Patton said yes. So I'm loving the chat. But I do want to ask this. DeVos has asked this a few times. I hope it's all right if I just bring this in.
Yeah.
He said, I really want to know how the majority of Taiwan thinks about integrating with China. I suspect the semiconductor companies really call the shots here, and he wants to talk, he's interested to talk about corruption within Taiwan. But just on how the majority of Taiwan thinks about integrating with China, we do have some polling, don't we, that I could show.
Yes.
And it would be just good to hear from you, Chris, on this. So this was done by the Pew Research Organisation. I think it's from January last year. 2/3 of adults in Taiwan consider themselves primarily Taiwanese. And if you look at the ages between 18 to 34, 83% think that feel that they are primarily Chinese. Of the total population, only 3% believe that they are primarily Chinese. So that's pretty strong polling there, isn't it?
It is, and that 3% actually kind of tracks quite well with another poll, which is done by National Zhengzhou University here in Taiwan. And basically, you know, every few months, this university, one of Taiwan's top universities, it asks survey respondents, like, you know, do you favor unification with China? And you know, different timelines are presented, but like, you know, one of the options is, you know, like unification now, just right now. And 3% of Taiwanese respondents say they want unification now. Most Taiwanese people, the overwhelming majority, more than 90%, don't ever, you know, they do not favor unification in any way.
Never, ever.
You know, then there's shades in there. There are some who are, you know, there are a lot of people who think of themselves, you know, largely as being ethnic Chinese. And if if China were to democratize, they would consider it. And then there's also some people who are like, let's just keep kicking the can down the road until we have a clear idea of what we want to do. But in terms of people who want unification now, it's 3%. And it should be pointed out that National Zhengzhou University, this is the former party school of the Kuomintang. It was founded in China, you know, a century ago. And this is not like a Taiwanese university. This is a Chinese university that relocated to Taiwan. And this is what they're finding. So this is not like slanted, you know, like, you know, Taiwanese propaganda. This is from a historically Chinese institution.
I think it is important just that we did show that, because there's a lot of conversation about this in the chat between people who were saying that the Taiwanese do feel Chinese and those who don't. So that is certainly, as Chris was saying, and as we are showing here, the polling certainly shows that the majority of people in Taiwan do not believe that they are primarily Chinese.
I think the difficulty is that there are so many Chinese who leave China to study abroad, and they've been told, they have not been told about polls like this. And so the first time you present it to them is kind of a shock. It's hard to believe. But you and I, Chris, both know that it's not just this polling that you're referencing, but multiple polls from different organizations and universities and international polling as well, such as from Pew, has shown this. I want to, you know, you touched on something a while ago about the two-state solution that triggered this thought. We're getting a little philosophical, but I think it could be a great way for people to better understand Taiwan, which is the concept and definition of a country, which, by the way, in the very beginning, you mentioned the Montevideo Convention. I think a lot of people, this is sort of my takeaway when I talk to people, is that they say Taiwan is not a country because they are not diplomatically recognized at the United Nations, and they have very few countries that have formal diplomatic relations with them. I think just about 10 or a little bit more than that. And it kind of raises an interesting question. 13. It raises an interesting question because Palestine is recognized officially by far more countries. But when you look at its borders, we are well aware that it doesn't have sovereignty and control within its own borders in the same way that if you went to Taiwan, is very clear that the government has a grip on. So just a couple of things that I want to point out, and I'd love for you to jump in because you know these systems a lot better, but people should know that Taiwan has its own universal healthcare system. When you pay taxes, you're not paying Beijing, you're paying Taipei. It has its own military. It has its own passport, which we can also, if people are curious, we can pull up the picture of the passport. I could go on. I think even it has its own internet domain, right? It's not, we have .de in Germany and .uk, and in Taiwan it's .tw. Of course, that's just one other characteristics. But what else would you sort of, I don't know if I've forgotten anything in there, but if you want to expound on any of the things that I've mentioned there, just to help people understand, because I think when they think of a contested territory, they think they're going to a zone that's just messy, unsafe, military everywhere, perhaps military from different sides, and that's just not what we've got there.
No, it's very safe. It's one of the safest countries on the planet, and in terms of sovereignty, what makes a country? It's sovereignty, and Taiwan runs its own show. It doesn't answer to Beijing in any way, and so there's no Chinese soldiers here, there's no Chinese police here. It's all Taiwanese or under the Republic of China government here. And so a lot of Taiwanese, maybe 10, 20, 30 years ago, they wanted to overthrow the Republic of China and establish a Taiwanese state. But then a pragmatism, that Taiwanese have cultivated, through their kind of tragic history, emerged, where it's like, look, the Republic of China is Taiwan, and it's independent, and it's become Taiwanified or Taiwanized for lack of a better term, and so Taiwan democratized the Republic of China. And for people who grew up under martial law, the 40 years of martial law under the KMT, they only know the Republic of China in Taiwan, and they're kind of inseparable at this point. And I think you have Tsai Ing-wen, the previous president, and the current president, Lai Ching-te. They both said there's no need to declare independence because Taiwan is already independent, and it has its own customs area, and customs regime and whatnot. It's in APEC as its own economy. That said, Hong Kong is too, but Hong Kong is undisputedly administered by the People's Republic of China, and Hong Kong and Taiwan, while there may be some similarities, you can't oversimplify it and compare them directly, because Hong Kong has been part of the People's Republic of China since 1997, and Taiwan has never been part of the People's Republic of China.
And it was formally handed over. What about people who say, and then I see Alex has got some more comments and questions, but very quickly, what about people who say, well, in Taiwan they speak Mandarin, mostly they speak Chinese, so, that as a logic of it being very strongly connected to China?
Well, I speak English, so I guess I'm an English citizen. I don't know, an English national. That's not the best argument. So Mandarin arrived with the KMT in 1945. At that time, Taiwanese people spoke a Taiwanese variant of a Chinese language from Fujian across the strait, the closest part of China to Taiwan, that had developed for 2 or 3 centuries on its own in China, and it absorbed Dutch words and Japanese words and whatever. But it is largely usable in other parts of Southeast Asia and also Southeast China. But then also, everybody spoke Japanese, and then you also had Hakka, which is another Chinese subgroup, and then also Taiwanese indigenous languages. And when the KMT arrived, they scrapped Japanese altogether, and they just only spoke to Taiwanese people in Mandarin. So people had to start learning Mandarin in 1945 just to understand their new government. So okay, that doesn't really seem like the strongest case for why Taiwan is part of the People's Republic of China, or any China.
It reminds me of Irish who mostly speak English, although their native tongue is Gaelic, and of course they have a strong identity. They would never actually, think of themselves as English. That's far from the exact opposite entirely. But Alex,
Yeah, look, I just wanted to pick up on our chat, Chris, because I did mention it to you, but we talked about the polling from Pew. But that word corruption, this is coming up a lot in the chat. Murphy, for example, saying, you know, I want to know. I want to know about corruption in Taiwan, and various people coming up with where it is in the index of corrupt countries. I've been seeing 25th, someone else said 12th. But it would just be good to hear about that from you. Is Taiwan corrupt?
Well, I think every country has corruption issues, and they vary, and they manifest themselves in different ways. If you look at my country, the United States, in many ways, corruption is legalized and called lobbying, and it's an industry. But in Taiwan, yes, there's on both sides of the political spectrum, there have been cases of corruption, but overall, I would say that Taiwan it's a very transparent country. You wouldn't be able to have what Taiwan has if it was wildly corrupt, because it just wouldn't function at the level needed to be one of the world's top trading countries. And it's really if corruption were as big a problem as some people say it is, how do you explain its ability to function in the global system the way that it does?
I guess, Chris, maybe to help people better understand the corruption in Taiwan or lack thereof, would I have to pay off a cop if they stopped me for speeding in Taiwan? Does that kind of thing happen? Are there small payoffs in the way that you see in many other countries?
I think during martial law there was a lot more of that. I think democratization, in the early days of democracy here, in the 90s, and Taiwan didn't democratize until it had its first legislative elections in 1992, its first presidential election in 96. So it's still a very young democracy, and it's still consolidating its democracy. And there both the KMT and the DPP, there's been high profile cases of corruption on both sides in recent years, but it's become less egregious over the years. And while it's still an issue, in what country is it not an issue? You need watchdogs, you need people, checks and balances, and you need to hold people to account. So, I honestly, I wasn't really expecting to be asked about corruption, because
okay.
I was expecting more like war and chips and stuff.
No.
But yeah,
who knows what people are going to pop in the chat? So this is what
it's fun. It's great. It's nice.
And one other thing that came up in our community post and is also coming up in the chat now is the comparison that people are trying to make between China, Taiwan, and Germany, when Germany, before it was unified, when we had the East and the West. And comments have been, look, China supported the reunification of Germany. Why is Germany not supporting the reunification of Taiwan to China?
I think, Chris, with your history lesson, answered part of that, but let's deal with it head on. What would you say to people making that analogy?
Well, how can Taiwan be reunified with a country that's never ruled it? The People's Republic of China has never ruled Taiwan. So, it's like how can you divorce someone that you've never married?
I think that's another analogy to answer the question from another analogy. Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Throwing in some German there as well. So thank you very much. German history.
Yeah, Chris, we're sort of winding down here, but I'm just looking through my notes to see if there's anything that I've missed. And one thing I want to ask you about is you touched on Taiwanese identity. What is Taiwanese identity? After you've explained how Japan colonized it, how it's largely influenced in many ways by Chinese culture, including the language. Are people still working out what that identity is, and how much is the threat of China something that influences the way people in Taiwan create that identity?
Well, I think describing any country's national identity is going to be a challenge, and I think I've got like 2 or 3 minutes to do that
no,
here.
we can
but,
go
I'll do
over.
my
We
best.
can go over. It's
Okay,
not
cool.
a hard out.
Yeah,
So
I would. Okay, yeah, I would say basically, Taiwan's identity comes from its serial colonialization over or colonization over the past 400 years. And but it's also very much connected to its indigenous inhabitants, who are only 2% of the current population, but also they've had a big impact on Taiwanese identity, just like Native Americans have in my country. And so there's been different waves of people arriving, different waves of migration into Taiwan. And the most recent one is not the Chinese, the arrival of the Kuomintang party state, the ROC, in the 40s. It's actually Southeast Asians. So, they call themselves new residents of Taiwan and Xinjumin. And so what they are is primarily it's 4 countries, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Malaysia. The Philippines are contributing the most of this current wave of migrants. And every time you have new people coming into a country, there's an adjustment period, and there's friction and whatnot, and these growing pains for Taiwan, that had been told by the KMT that it was Chinese prior, and prior to that you had, Japan said it was Japanese. Now there's this Taiwanese identity that's kind of trying to figure out what to do with Southeast Asians. So it's like any country, you get different waves of migration. And I've been living in East Asia since 2000. Every time I go back to my country, it's a little bit different, and I enjoy it. I think it's it's just basically how human history has always gone. Nobody stays put. People move. And I think a national identity, it's kind of informed by who the groups are that were originally there, who the arrivals are, and kind of what the national both the national pride and the national traumas are. And so yeah, that's what makes each country unique, and Taiwan has plenty of all that.
Some comments here. DeVos saying, what would it take for me, a US citizen, to move to Taiwan and become a citizen? Somebody else replying to DeVos, you're in a German news channel. I don't think anyone here could help you with moving to the Republic of China, but good luck with moving there. So,
Chris, you got immigration advice?
Yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of comedy going on in the chat. One thing that I don't know if we have time to answer this, and I don't, Chris, I'm not asking for another long history lesson, but William Patton has asked a couple of times now that he said, I would still love to know what China would have been like if the KMT had won against the CCP. Is that possible to answer? Is that too difficult to answer?
Speculative.
It's a total hypothetical, but I think one thing that's worth when you look at the KMT and how it was received, and we're talking about pre-democratization KMT. I kind of consider the KMT to have like 3 different stages. One was when it was in China. The other was after it arrived in Taiwan, but it was martial law and like military dictatorship, and then post-democracy. So I'm not talking about the current KMT. Yeah. I'm talking about the martial law era KMT. But yeah, I think part of the reason that Taiwanese rose up against the KMT, it was because they were very unpopular. But also, take that just upstream a little bit to China. Why did the communist revolution succeed? There are several factors. The Soviet Union helping the communists was definitely a major factor, but also the huge unpopularity of the Republic of China and the Kuomintang in China. That was a key contributing factor. And so, I don't think there's any way, I don't know how to talk about alternate realities, but I mean that's an alternate reality that we're never going to see or experience.
That's my specialty, because I just had a book come out, as some of you guys know, earlier this year. That's a speculative novel and fiction, as you know, Chris. But you know what? I actually I wasn't joking. So let's answer that question. I mean, I know you're not an immigration lawyer, but you know plenty of people who have arrived in Taiwan over the last few years. Roughly a sketch, if somebody wanted to spend a little bit more time in Taiwan than beyond a tourist, do you know how that works?
Sure. Yeah. I've been here for 10 years. Yeah. I mean, it depends on what you're doing and what your purpose of coming here is. But in general, I would say, like it's a pretty conservative immigration regime here, and this is where it's like, okay, it's in Taiwan, but it is the former Republic of China, which just a few decades ago was not that different from North Korea, and now it's the freest country in East Asia, with the freest media environment, I might say, since we're all journalists here. But yeah, it's become a lot more welcoming for journalists such as myself. But I mean, I think if you just want to like move to Taiwan, you really kind of you need to have special skills. They're expanding, they're liberalizing their immigration policy. But when I first got here 10 years ago, basically the only way for foreigners to become ROC nationals, not Taiwanese citizens, ROC nationals would be to give up their own citizenship. So there weren't a lot of people doing that, and for obvious reasons. But getting back to nationality and passports, you brought up the Taiwanese passport, and people online and at home can check this online. But in terms of visa-free entry into other countries, the ROC Taiwan passport is more widely accepted than the PRC passport. So
that's interesting.
It's a good passport to have to travel all over the world. Yeah. Who knew?
I did not
yeah,
know
well,
that.
a lot of people have other passports as well, just in case. But yeah, it is kind of contradictory. Like it's not recognized by most governments, but its nationals can come in no problem with their own passport.
DeVoe's saying, does Taiwan need more personal trainers? Asking for a friend.
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know. But I'm sure you could. I'm sure you could go online. There's forums and whatnot that you could.
Work
you could
visas,
probably
that's
pose
for
that
sure.
question in. Yeah.
And Chris, any final thoughts before we let you go? And then we're going to go to the poll and everything. But I wanted to check with you. We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, I guess the whole thing is, for me, Taiwan is. A lot of people talk about Taiwan's erasure and its invisibility and whatnot, and it's usually blamed on China. But actually, what it is today, okay, the Cold War, that's over. And today, what you have is, who's disappearing, who's erasing Taiwan? It's us. It's the liberal democracies. It's the countries that are supposedly, sharing the same values as the democracy in Taiwan. And we do this because we're afraid of China to whatever extent. But if you actually look at it, there's no reason why countries can't increase their interactions with Taiwan, without necessarily officially recognizing it. And it's worth pointing out here that part of the reason, the main reason that Taiwan isn't recognized by most countries is because Beijing will not recognize any country, from the U.S., to whoever, Germany, any other country. They won't recognize that country diplomatically if they have official diplomatic relations with the ROC in Taiwan. So that's the main reason. It's not because these countries don't see Taiwan as a country. They're making a calculated choice, and it's for democracies and some other countries, it really goes against their kind of stated or professed values.
Chris Horton, thank you so much for joining us. We're really grateful for your time.
Thank you, Melissa and Alex. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. It was very interesting.
Very interesting. And just on that last point, might be interesting for people to know, and Annalie, maybe you can pop it in the chat, but actually there are only 11 UN members who maintain formal ties with Taiwan, and they are mostly small Caribbean and Pacific Island countries. I won't go into all the other countries' relationships with Taiwan and what they call it, but it is only 11, which is fascinating that it's such a small number.
Yes. And you might remember Chris said 13. I think the Vatican is not counted in there. So it gets a little bit murky. And that's why you have a little bit of a discrepancy in the numbers. Both are correct in their own way, depending on how you define it. Just wanted to point that out if you're extra sharp.
And one other thing for you, Melissa, Psyche Mackin, right at the beginning, said, I'm going to rely on Melissa Chan's insights today, and was asking you personal questions, which well, not personal, but questions about Taiwan, and asking what your thoughts are about it, but I think we've probably reached the end of our discussion, and we had great guests anyway who could fill in the void.
Absolutely. I mean, I would lob any questions sent to me over to Chris or Jason for that, and I'm really glad that they were able to make it. So, Annalie, let's see what people think about the future of Taiwan after our discussion. Now, this question was asked in the beginning. What do you got for us?
Yeah, so the future of Taiwan, as we've talked about, it's very scattered. There's a lot to talk about. Over 100 people have participated in the poll, so that's great. Thank you. And 36% have voted that they see continued self-governance in Taiwan. But also 29% saw Taiwan facing increased tension with China. So this could both actually, sounds very likely. And then 18% see closer ties with China as well. And 17% see too unpredictable to say. So very divided.
It's pretty split across the board. I mean, in opposite directions with both of those sort of strata of 30%, and then the percentages in the teens. All right, so we have a very diverse audience in terms of how you imagine the future of Taiwan. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you learned a thing or two.
I certainly did, a huge amount. Thanks very much for everyone in the chat. Sorry we didn't get to ask and answer all your questions, but I think we did manage to answer quite a lot. Just a reminder that what we will be discussing next week will be on our YouTube community post around about 24 hours beforehand. So do check it out, and we hope that you will be able to join us then. Thank you very much again.
Thank you. Have a good day.